Well, welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and we got a lineup of some great guests for you today on Focus Today. First of all, we're going to start off with a very unique interview with Juanita Ingram. She is Miss World International 2012. And earlier, her and Paulina talked about, the whole idea of children in child beauty pageants. Is it a good idea? Let's join that conversation.
Well, most parents think that their children are the most beautiful ones in the world, and many parents go to the extreme of entering them into all kinds of beauty pageants. Now, when you look at those, you can't help but wonder, is it about a kid or is it about a parent? So, Juanita, what's your take on that?
Well, I think it is certainly to the individual, so it can certainly vary. But I think for the most part, for certain pageants and within a certain age group, it usually is more about the parent than it is about the child. In fact, recently, earlier this year, the Journal for American Academy and Child Adolescent Psychiatry actually took a look at these sort of kiddie pageant systems. And what they found in their study is that the majority of the parents that participate in these events it's not about the child. It's all about the parent. And they actually coined the phrase princess by proxy, so that a lot of the mothers are living out their fantasies of being a princess or a pageant queen through their daughters, which is really not a healthy endeavor.
Well, originally you're from Tennessee, but now you're in Europe, and there have been some changes, legal changes in Europe regarding those beauty pageants. Tell us about those.
Absolutely. The French government just recently, a couple of months ago, voted to ban childhood pageants. So any pageant involving a child under the age of 16 is now illegal. There are hefty fines associated with that, up to 30,000 euros, which is about $40,000, and up to 2 years in jail. So not only running these type of pageants, but also participating in them. So they're not just regulating the industry, but they're regulating parenting and making good decisions and wise decisions to participate in the type of pageants that what they coin as hypersexualizing young children, having them dress up in heavy makeup, seductive attire. So they banned those type of pageants in France.
And that's what age? What is it considered to have a child pageant?
16 and under. So any above 16 is fine, but 16 and under.
Now, do you think this trend will catch in the United States?
It's hard to say if it will catch in the United States. The U.S. is usually not going to take its cultural cues from France, but perhaps it is something that we as a society should take a look at. The problem is that the kiddie pageant industry is $1 billion industry. As of last year, it was $1 billion industry. And so when you have that much marketing and money behind it, it's hard to say whether or not as a society we'll take a step back and really evaluate what is in the best interest of our children. I don't think it will catch on, but I do think it can spark the conversation about what are healthy decisions for our young girls. I think some parents really are seeking the opportunity for young girls to build self-esteem and confidence. And let me just say, I'm an advocate for pageantry. I'm a pageant participant myself. I think pageantry at its root is a wonderful thing. I've seen young women really blossom, come into a large level of self-esteem, win tens of thousands of dollars for scholarship money and hundreds of thousands of dollars for their charity of choice. But I do think we have to evaluate whether or not it is in the best interest of a child, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, to dress up in heavy makeup and hypersexual attire, and really question the parenting skills of someone who would seek to do that.
So as a mother and a lawyer and wife, do you think banning the pageants is the solution for what we're trying to protect our children from?
I understand why they would do it. I do think that it is a step in the right direction. I don't know if you can really, what we're trying to protect our children from is poor parenting decisions. And I don't know if that stops at a beauty pageant. I do think for a certain age and a certain type of pageant, it is inappropriate. So you do have natural pageants that don't require girls to wear makeup under a certain age. You have different type of pageants that are princess related and are just a fun time. But I think what we're trying to protect our children from, again, are poor decisions and trying to seek to have self-esteem. And so as I put in my book, Winning with Christ, our self-esteem and our confidence has to come from more than just the exterior. So what we're trying to do is to help our young girls to know that they are more than just the exterior of how they look and their bodies, and really trying to feed into this hypersexualization of our young children, which is ultimately unhealthy.
You know, you mentioned your book, Winning with Christ, and you do talk in there about the source of real beauty and the self-worth. When you take a girl she's not confident, she's been bullied, or whatever happens in school, and I mean, what do you tell her as a parent to bring her confidence back and to make her love herself without all the pageants and all? What's your advice to parents on that?
That's a wonderful question. You know, it is so important for me. I am a Christian mother. So it's so important for me that my children, because I have a 5-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son, that they know who they are and have an identity in Christ. For those who are not followers of Christ, again, identity and knowing who you are and where your self-worth comes from, I would say to parents is to talk to your children, have a dialogue with them, and to start early. Start them in programs that really build up their character. Talk to them about who they are. And if you are a Christian parent, really involve them in activities that let them know who Christ has called them to be, that they are significant because God has called us to be significant. So nothing insignificant can come from something that is significant in and of itself. And I would tell parents, even as early as the age of 3 and 4 years old, I've also written a series called The Wonderfully Made Pals that deal with self-esteem, confidence, who we are in Christ for parents and children ages 3 to 8, and really helping parents to open that dialogue up with their children about who they are, because it all starts with identity. When we know who we are, we act accordingly. So it's about building up who we are as inside, as our character, our reflection of Christ for me.
Well, also, what we wear makes us behave a certain way, right? And what can you? And there have been so many debates and discussions on the clothes the girls are wearing nowadays. In the short time that we have, can you give us what you think about that? Because now you've been here and you've been in Europe, and there are definitely, well, I would assume, differences in the way girls dress. What do you think about this whole situation?
I think there are differences in the way girls dress, but I think there's a universal trend of the lack of modesty in attire. And that's what I really try to emphasize, and why I talk about winning with Christ, because when I competed in pageants, and I've won several titles and several international titles, I made it a point not to wear anything that I would be ashamed to stand on stage with Christ and wear. So I wanted to prove to people that you can win in life following the precepts of God's word. So again, no one's saying smear ashes on your head and wear sackcloth and, you know, not wear makeup or not to look your best. But you can be modest and still respect yourself and still succeed and feel good about yourself, because really beauty comes from within. It's more than just the exterior. It is truly from character. It is truly from something that comes from within. And for me, it's the reflection of Christ and who you are. For others, it can truly be about who they are inside more than just the exterior. So yes, I think you can be modest and ladylike and still be flashy and fabulous and everything that you would want to be.
Now, you have judged, going back to the beauty pageants now, you have judged some of the ones for children, right? And you said, what's the age group that you judged?
I believe it was 12 and 13-year-olds was the youngest. And in that particular pageant, it was a natural pageant. And it was a wonderful experience. These young girls really had the opportunity to show their talent. They sang, they danced, they had the opportunity to dress up in their princess gowns. But it was a natural pageant. There were no fake eyelashes and heavy makeup and, you know, hypersexual attire. It was a wonderful experience. It was the UK Dazzling Beauties pageant, and it was really nice, very nice.
Are those pageants also going to be banned in Europe, or just the fake ones?
Right now, for France, it's all pageants under the age of 16, whether it's what they call a glitz pageant, so the type of pageant you see in tiara, toddlers and tiara, or whether it's a natural pageant. So they're going for the age as opposed to the type of pageant it is. So for right now, it's just in France.
Well, whether the pageant is a natural one where you don't have any fake hair or make eyelashes, or whether it's one of those that we kind of look and we just, you don't see a child there, it's a bunch of makeup. Still, right. the girls who win, they get the praise, they get the money, whatever the price is. But those who lose, and when you lose at that age, it's really devastating, regardless of the pageant.
It is, and I think that's why the French are taking the position of age specific, regardless of the type of pageant, because of the win-lose factor, and understanding that we live in a competitive world, but it is damaging at times. You know, that's why it's so important to know what winning and what success really looks like, what God has for you and what he doesn't, and it's more so about the journey. I've seen a lot of young girls participate in pageants, and although they may not have won at the end of the day the particular crown, they walked away with the ability to speak in front of an audience in a better way. But it is, again, you have to be a very mature individual to take that type of journey, and I'm not sure that that is appropriate. And clearly the French don't agree that it isn't appropriate for someone under the age of 16 to have that type of scrutiny and pressure.
Have you ever lost a pageant?
Oh, yes. You win some, you lose some.
So how did you handle it? With Christ, I would assume?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think it's important to know why you're there. And so, you know, I've won and I've lost, but I've lost in the eyes of man and won for me, and accomplished the goal that I had. In particular, before we moved over to the UK, I lost a particular pageant over in the US, and then immediately came over here and became Mrs. World United Kingdom. So God has a plan for us all. Sometimes what we see as losing is really God just changing our direction and sending us in another direction. So again, I'm an adult. I can handle those type of things, and I didn't take it personally because I know who God has called me to be. So I still feel like I win with Christ in every experience.
And that's the name of your book, Winning with Christ. That's one that I would like to suggest. You also have a series called The Wonderfully Made Pals. Tell us about this one, and how does that help parents communicate with their children?
Absolutely. It's a 7-part series, and each book, the first 3 were named after my children, and each book deals with different topics, and they're scripture-based. So they're multicultural, from African-American to Hispanic community to Caucasian. So all of the children have someone that they can identify with. And they talk about generosity, about kindness, about self-esteem and confidence. And it gives the parents activities in the back of the book to do with their children to boost confidence, to teach them about kindness, and to give their children a scripture to memorize. So it helps parents have the dialogue about faith with their children.
Are those books available in the United States?
Yes, they're all available on Kindle and Amazon.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for all this information and talking to us about beauty pageants, because I know there are a lot of parents out there, a lot of Christian parents who are wondering, do I enter my child? Do they go into school pageants? As we have about a minute left, give us a message to the parents here in our Christian community, or even non-Christian parents who are still struggling with that.
Well, you know, I think, again, it's all about being involved. I think pageantry with a purpose is a beautiful thing. Our first record of pageantry is in the book of Esther. So there isn't anything wrong inherently with pageantry, but surely it has to be done with the supervision of a parent if your child is under the age of 18, in my opinion. And again, pageantry with a purpose is great. If it's for scholarship, it's for charity, it's a wonderful thing, but surely under the watchful and guided eye of a parent. And remember, most important, that beauty comes from within, and that we are more than just our exterior.
Thank you, Juanita. You're beautiful. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. God bless. Thank you.
All right. Well, beautiful lady. All right. Well, listen, coming up next, there is a sad trend going on. Why is it that nobody wants to go to church anymore? Not everybody, but a lot are saying no to the idea. Well, we'll talk about it next.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at the Dove TV. Did you know that when you support the Dove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Well, there's some studies out there that a lot of people just don't want to go to church. And there's a lot of reasons that lead up to this. And some of it's generational, some of it's cultural. Overall, the good news is not very exciting. But earlier, Steve Johnson had a chance to talk to Thom Schultz, the CEO of Group Publishing. and he's authored a book, Why Nobody Wants to Go to Church Anymore, and they discuss the decline of church attendance. So let's join them in their conversation.
You know, I really like the title of your book, but it's also a little disconcerting, I'd have to say. You know, the fact that why nobody wants to go to church anymore, I think that's been a problem that has been in the back of our mind, maybe a part of a lot of discussions. But I want to ask you first, before we find out what you found out, what was your concern that caused you to write this book? Did you notice this trend in your own church, perhaps?
Not only in my own church, but we've been working professionally resourcing churches over the past 40 years. And we've noticed a number of things over those decades that have led us to some real concern. There's something happening right now that's different than what's happened in the past 100 years in the church in America.
Okay, you know, I think of the 70s and the 80s and kind of the youth movement bringing up all sorts of praise and worship type churches. So we have seen kind of growth that way, but we are seeing some problems. Tell us what you have found in your research about people who are leaving the church.
There are some startling things happening today. In fact, 80% of churches today are either stuck or in decline. And we're losing people across the board, all demographics, all denominations. And it's especially striking in the younger generations. The millennial generation is leaving us in record numbers.
Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't Christians. They're what, just not going to church necessarily every week?
Correct. Although there is some softening in terms of people identifying themselves as Christian or with any religion, what's sometimes called the nones, the N-O-N-E-S, people who choose no religious affiliation. That group in America is growing, and rather quickly.
All right, so what were some of the questions that you posed to, I suppose, people who were going to church, who weren't going to church, and maybe people in between, if you can be that way?
Well, we found 4 different recurring themes that came up with people across the country, both in our own research and in other people's research. We conducted interviews with people across the country, and 4 things came up as to why they were staying away from church. First one is they say, I feel judged, that church people and the church in general judges me, myself, my background, my past, my lifestyle, and that's one of the things that's keeping them away. The second thing that we heard over and over, and this one surprised us a bit because we hadn't heard this before. This one was that at church, you're just lecturing me. It's a one-way communication setup where you're not interested in what I think. You're not interested in my thoughts or my questions. And they are interested no more in that kind of approach. People today are coming from an interactive society, probably driven by the internet, where they want to be involved in the process. They want to go back and forth. They want their questions addressed. So church as we know it simply is not set up for that in their point of view. The third thing that we heard is that, well, this one's probably familiar to us, that church and church people are simply a bunch of hypocrites. But what's new about that is they're not simply saying that, well, you say one thing and do another. What they're reflecting upon is that you're setting yourself up as a know-it-all, as the person with all the answers, and we know it's not that simple. They want to be engaged with people who are seeing that they are part of the journey, part of a spiritual journey, and that we're all in this together is what they're looking for. And finally, the fourth thing that we heard from people is that, you know what, your God seems irrelevant, or at least when I have attached myself to a church experience, a worship service or whatever, I don't really sense the presence of God there. I can find God elsewhere in greater degree than I do in what you do at church.
Well, you know, some of the things that you've mentioned there, if you just take the structure of how church is kind of designed, the meetings, it doesn't matter what theological perspective you come from, the format is largely, I think, the same. You know, you normally have a preacher who is preaching out there. Do you think this could really change a lot in that style structure to be able to be relevant to millennials, for example?
Yeah, that's what we're asking people to do, is to reevaluate the methods that we're using in the church. We're not asking to reevaluate the message. The message is the same and will always be the same. But the methods that people, human beings, have created over the past hundreds of years are called into question now. So, for instance, we're looking at coming back upon those 4 things that people say are driving them away from church, and we're suggesting 4 things that we can do differently that will connect better with today's culture.
So have you come up with those 4 proposals?
Yeah. When people say, I feel judged, we say, let's create an environment of radical hospitality. And by that, we mean that we're ready to accept, just as Jesus did, we're ready to accept the person just as they are without judging them. Now, that doesn't mean that we're endorsing everything that they do or all of their values. We believe that we can accept without necessarily endorse, and that's what people are looking for. We call that radical hospitality. And when they say, well, I don't want to be lectured, it's a one-way communication structure, we say, let's engage in fearless conversation, where it's a two-way street. Even Sunday morning in worship, where we allow for people to engage with one another, spend a few minutes talking with one another about the subject at hand, and allow questions. Now, I know sometimes that makes pastors and preachers freak out because they say, well, what happens if somebody asks me a question I don't know the answer to? Well, that's where the fearless part of the conversation comes in, where we're not afraid to tackle any question or any subject that people come up with. And it's okay to say, you know what? I don't know the answer to that question, but together we're going to find some ways through this. The third thing that people say is that the church is just a bunch of hypocrites. Well, we say the antidote to that is genuine humility, where we have an authenticity that we project with people, where they get the idea that, you know what, we're all in this together. No one of us is closer to God, or no one of us has all the answers. We're all in this together, and we're going to work through it together. When they sense that, that's attractive to people. And then finally, when people say your God is irrelevant or I'm not finding God there, we advocate that we use something that we call divine anticipation, that we're looking for God to show up, and we create our experiences around that. We give space for God to show up. You know, I think sometimes in the church, we've become so accustomed to putting out what we're putting out that we're ready to move on to more advanced theological stuff. And where the culture is today is they're way back at first base, where they just want to know that God is real. And the more that we can bring up the stories, even from among the people, from among their peers, where they can hear stories of God active today, not just yesterday, not just 2,000 years ago when the scriptures were written, but today, where they can see that God is actually alive, active, and among us today. That's attractive to people.
You know, I think most of the items that you mentioned there, I think a lot of churches would strive to have. They may not have it, but that idea of saying, hey, we're not perfect. In fact, we're kind of the spiritual hospital, so that's why we're here. As well as a pastor, if he projects himself or herself as infallible, then that's going to be a problem right there, too. It almost, I think, when you were talking about this, I was thinking back, remember talk shows when you'd watch on TV, they'd be a one-way conversation until Phil Donahue started running up and down the aisles with microphones asking questions. Now, I only want to bring the analogy to that and a church service the same, but I think what you're talking about is having this ability to be able to have an ongoing conversation, which I almost think the first generation Christians after Christ left and left the apostles in charge, that's probably the kind of environment they had, because I'm sure they had a lot of questions, met in smaller groups, and I'm sure there was a dialogue going back and forth. So in a way, do you see this almost as reinventing ourselves back to what may have been the very first type of church services?
Yeah, in many ways, exactly that. We're looking back to how the church began, and we can find some real secrets there, I think, that we need to return to. Because what we're finding ourselves with today, I think, is not too dissimilar from what Jesus found when he came and began his ministry here, and he found that the church, as we know it back then, the temple, was distracted by all sorts of other things that weren't directed at helping people develop a close and growing relationship with God. They were all bound up in rules and traditions that Jesus was highly critical of. He came in part to help shake that up and help people realize that it's time to return to what we're really about. I think we're in the same place today.
All right. We only have a few minutes left. I want to ask, have you come across opposition to some of these ideas that you say how we could reinvent ourselves? Are some people saying, this isn't what I really feel comfortable doing? Maybe some pastors who've had that thought?
Sure have. When dealing with the church in particular, we're dealing with a behemoth of a machine that is cloaked and bound by tradition. We've been doing the same thing for so long that our methodology in many people's minds has become holy itself. And when you challenge that, it makes people very uncomfortable. And when we talk about the reasons that people say they're staying away from church, one of the knee-jerk reactions that some church leaders have is wanting to attack the unchurched, saying, well, those reasons are bogus. They're just excuses. And they want to spend their time attacking people for coming up with those reasons on why they're staying away. And that's a waste of time from our point of view. To attack the customer, as it were, will never help us solve the problem and help make the gospel more approachable for people. Not changing the message, but changing the method of how we do that.
I'm thinking you may be opening up a whole nother classroom activity for would-be pastors on how to perform your church service out of the box, so to speak, because of all of this. I appreciate you being with us. Thom Schultz, author of Why Nobody Wants to Go to Church Anymore. I appreciate you kind of tackling this, and I think a lot of people are going to be fascinated by what you've come up with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, fascinating to say the least. All right, coming up next, what about getting in the trenches and getting your hands dirty for Jesus? Well, would he have done that, or did he do it? We'll talk about that next.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at the Dove TV. Compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at the Dove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Well, welcome back. Boy, we've got a lot of things going on today as it relates to authentic Christianity. Let's put it that way. Our next guest is Johnnie Moore. He's the author of a book entitled Dirty God, Jesus in the Trenches, and examining the amazing gift of grace. And I think you'll find this to be pretty interesting. Let's join my conversation with Johnnie now. Johnnie, what a great delight to have you with us today.
Hey, Perry. Great to be with you.
Man, what led you to get into this, to write this one?
Well, I really believe that Jesus chose to be fully God and fully human for a reason. And I thought we'd written lots of books and talked a lot about Jesus' divinity, but it's in his humanity that we really get and understand grace. We understand how we're to live our lives. We understand what could happen if we did live the way Jesus lived his. And so I decided to write a book on the dirty God, the Jesus who had dirt under his fingernails.
Yeah. Well, it's an inspiring book, and if Jesus was walking on earth today, where would you think we would find him?
Now, I think we'd find him with regular people. I don't think he would be in the gilded sanctuaries. I don't think he would be the subject of sophistication. I think he could relate to those people, and he did relate to those people. But I think we find in the Bible, and we would find in our day today, a Jesus that does everything he can to relate to the rest of us. And, Jesus chose to be born in the city he was born in. He chose to live the life he lived. He chose to be in a village of 400 people. He chose to be on earth, at least, a carpenter's son. He did all of this for a reason. And so I think that if you and I were having coffee with Jesus, the God of the universe today, we would find ourselves talking to someone who really seemed to understand our struggles, our everyday life, who could relate to us.
You bring an interesting balance to the humanity and yet the deity, which is so critical, because sometimes we can get a little lopsided in that argument, but or in that perspective. But what I appreciate was the humility that you brought to the character of Christ in his humanity. Kind of enlighten us on that.
You know, I guess if all of us were the God of the universe, we would probably spend a lot of time brandishing our power, right? I mean, if I were Jesus, sometimes I joke, you know, I would be like playing soccer on the Sea of Galilee. I'd be, you know, showing up in the middle of the night in Herod's house and playing tricks on him. I mean, I would be like, I mean, when I came, I would come with like lightning and fireworks.
Yeah.
But not Jesus. I mean, the greatest miracle, I think, in the Bible isn't Jesus raising from the dead. I mean, that's, you know, with you know, being careful not to sound like a heretic. I mean, that's a great miracle, but that's an expected miracle. That's what God does. But the greatest miracle is when, you know, people could spit on him and he could resist his wrath. When Jesus could stare down and stand in front of the Pharisees, the religious leaders that were supposed to be guiding the people, and they were deceiving the people, and they were missing the Messiah, staring them right at the face, and to respond, you know, to them in grace, not in, you know, I mean, that kind of wrath that you read about in the Old Testament.
Right.
You know, the greatest miracle of Jesus is grace in all of its various forms throughout his time here on earth.
Yeah, I want to come back to the grace issue in just a moment, but let me ask you this. Do you think the American church has gotten a little too arrogant?
Yeah, I mean, I totally believe so. You know, I think many times in the United States, I mean, because we're largely a Christian nation, you know, perhaps decreasingly so, but lots of people feel like we're somehow entitled to God's attention. And what we have to understand is that God's attention always comes out of God's kindness. And he's very kind and he gives us lots of attention. But just because we can, you know, boldly walk into the throne of grace in our time of need doesn't mean that we should barge in like we own the place.
Well, you know, it's interesting. While we're arguing among ourselves who has the truth and who doesn't, most of humanity is falling through the cracks.
Yeah, that's true, and you know, we have a responsibility to be to others what Jesus has been to us as individual Christians. We're to follow him, and we're to tell others about him. You know, and that's one of the reasons why I wrote Dirty God, to capture the image of the Jesus that we could relate to more. You know, and I think that's interesting. Jesus didn't come like the Greco-Roman gods with perfect physiques, with great and grandiose temples. I mean, he came like a human being for a reason. And having gotten that grace from him, that kindness, we ought to give it to the world.
Let's go back to the grace issue because it's so important. And how would you define it?
You know, grace is God's kindness in its various forms. And so in its greatest form of him forgiving all of our sins at the cross, and in its simple form, like when he had patience with Peter over and over and over again, because he saw in Peter not who Peter was, but who Peter could become.
All right. Dirty God is, you know, in looking through it, it appears to me this also could be used as an evangelistic tool.
Yeah, absolutely, because it shows a non-typical Jesus. You know, lots of people do not believe in Jesus because they confuse the culture of the church, the way you have to, you know, a lot of like people that aren't believers, you know, feel uncomfortable going into churches because it's a culture. You have to dress a certain way, you have to act a certain way, you have to know when to stand up, when to sit down. Some people know the song, some people don't. But what we find in this book, Dirty God, is I've really emphasized the Jesus that you can relate to where you are, the Jesus that's concerned about you, that has kindness for you as an individual. And so maybe you've heard about Jesus your entire life, but maybe you haven't quite seen this side of him.
You use a lot of stories, Johnny, in the book, which are just really terrific. Give us a couple quickly. Yeah,
you know, I open the book by talking about an experience I had in India, where I'm a student of religions. I have 2 degrees in religion. I teach religion, and I've visited lots of the holiest places around the world in teaching and in studying. And I was at this particular shrine where I showed up there. It's a Sufi shrine in India, the holiest Sufi shrine, Sufis are mystic Muslims. And I remembered seeing this old lady, maybe in her 90s, very wrinkled face, begging and pleading outside the shrine of this deceased saint. He died in the 13th century, with her fingers held tight on the side of this grate next to the shrine. And I couldn't understand her language, but she was praying and she was pleading for her God to pay attention to her, just pleading with all of her might. And, you know, it hit me when I was thinking about that story and when I was writing Dirty God, that the one thing that makes Jesus different from every other idea of God in all of history is that every other idea of God has you banging and clanging and pleading and praying to try to get God's attention. Right. But the story of Jesus is God is concerned about us as individuals, and we don't have to climb up to him. He's come down to us. And so the book's filled with my experiences around the world, going to leper colonies, visiting peculiar and interesting people around the world, and seeing God do really remarkable things through everyday people.
On the other hand, we've never seen such a division and whose God is the one true God as it's being played out today in all cultures. And yet that provides the great opportunity for the Great Commission to be accomplished, especially in this day in which we live. And here at the Dove with radio and television, it's amazing to me how many people are crying out for help. And these are believers. So we're in a really interesting time in world religion history, and yet it provides the opportunity for the gospel. Do you see it that way?
I do. The last chapter of the book, I talk about what could happen if Christians around the world started living this lifestyle of grace. I mean, you don't have to hang around me very, very long here at Liberty University to know that I really believe that this is the generation with the greatest potential to complete the Great Commission. And I believe they'll do it. I mean, I was just the other day with 65,000 college students in the Georgia Dome in Atlanta. I mean, at Liberty University, we have nearly 100,000 students, and we're a blatantly evangelical university. We believe the Bible is the Word of God, and Jesus is the Son of God, and he saved the world. And so I'm a huge optimist when it comes to what could happen in this generation. And actually, that's the real reason, I think the overarching reason why I wrote the book, because I believe grace is something that's both gotten and something that's given. And we live in a hyper-religious world. Atheism is not growing statistically. Right. What is growing is religion. It's a matter of which way leads the right way. And I think Jesus is really unique.
And yet we're not changing the culture very fast. It doesn't appear, at least, Johnny, that we're impacting the culture. What do you say about that?
I think Jesus works in strange and mysterious ways, and I think the news media and lots of people can tell the story in the way they want to tell the story. Right. But when you're in the trenches, and the subtitle of this book is Jesus is in the trenches, and to some degree I'm in the trenches. There a few people in the country that interact with more college students probably than I do, just serving here at Liberty University, and I'm seeing amazing things all around the world. And so despite what might be floating to the surface in culture, I think this is a Saul Paul generation. I think there's very little in between. And when they get it, and lots of people are getting it.
And there seems to be a growth in Christianity among the younger people. If I could say the millennials and above a little bit, there seems to be a real turn towards Christ.
You got it. And, it's interesting. It seems like what God has done is he's custom designed a generation to reach the world. I mean, it's the most digital generation in history. It's a cause-oriented generation. I mean, lots of secular millennials, there are 80 million of them in the United States. Lots of secular ones are kind of more Christian in their cause behavior than lots of Christians are. And I'll take that. That's a first step. You can do Jesus-like things, and we can build the bridge to Jesus. And so, yeah, I think this generation really is showing really fantastic things. I mean, the group that I was just with has decided that in their generation they're going to end human slavery and sex trafficking, and they're really passionate about that. And the 65,000 I was with really believe that Jesus is the answer to all of that.
Oh, it's fascinating. Hey, Johnny, thank you for being with us. I know your schedule is very tight. Thanks for all you do and the passion that you are certainly radiating today. The book is entitled Dirty God, Jesus in the Trenches, forward by Rick Warren, written by Johnnie Moore. There's a picture of it on the screen. Let me encourage you to check it out at Evangel or online. It's put out by Thomas Nelson. Thank you, Johnny. We'll have you back. Keep up the fight, man. I just love your spirit.
Oh, thank you for having me. Let's do this thing.
All right, coming up next, we are going to talk more about the Korean War Veterans Association. We have Neil McCain back in the studio with us right after this quick timeout.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at the Dove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on the Dove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Well, I'm delighted to have back in the studio with us today Neil McCain. He's the commander of the Korean War Veterans Association, actually recognized by the state of Oregon. And he brought with him a new book, and Korea Reborn. Nice to see you, Neil. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
This is beautiful. Tell us about it.
Well, this is was one sent to me and by the Republic of Korea.
Let me hold it up to the camera for those who want to.
The Republic of Korea is wants to thank all the Korean War vets, and they've been so gracious at this. And they've also, if the vet is not available, they want to give it to the family.
Really?
And similar to that of the certificate of appreciation that they sent me with no mail.
Right.
Well, and these are not mailed, and they're heavy. My goodness gracious! Yeah. And so for me to mail each and every one of them would be quite expensive.
All right, so it's South Korea's way of saying thank you.
Yes, it is.
And if somebody knows a Korean War veteran, they what do they do in order to get a copy of this?
Well, they're going to probably have to call me first.
Okay.
And then we'll decide where. But I've been given 2,000 books.
Wow.
They've not been given to me yet.
Okay.
They're being shipped over to the Merlin National Guard.
Okay.
And I'm going to pick them up as I need them. But I just need the names of Korean War vets or the family of a Korean War vet that I can make the arrangements for them to pick it up. Now, I've also had the opportunity to talk to the manager of the Greyhound bus station. And I asked him, because I used to do this when I was a construction manager, doing shipping prints, shipping things, and I asked him if there's a way that they might be able to take these books, however many, the different spots, for free.
Right.
And he said, well, I'll think about that. Well, then I emailed him a couple times. He said, let's try it.
Wow.
Well, that's wonderful. So then I've also got the commander for California, which is Mr. Glazy, and Michael Glazy. He says, how can I help? And I said, well, make a list of all your Greyhound bus stations. So we are going to distribute this, as many as we can, and I assume this 2,000 that I have, if I run out, they'll give me more.
Okay. How do people get a hold of you, Neil?
541
Okay.
479 9489.
Okay. That's 541-479-9489.
Now, that's the house phone.
Okay. And if you are a Korean War veteran, you know of a Korean War veteran, know of a family of a Korean War veteran, get a hold of Neil and get one of these books. And this is an incredible memory and yet thankfulness gift, especially during the Thanksgiving week.
Yes.
It shows the history then and up through today, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
So what happens when you free a country?
Well, this is the only country I ever freed. So
no, but I mean that's what shows. That's what they show in there.
Absolutely. They have been more just overwhelming. In March of 2000, I went there to teach construction management, the Army bases. Those people were just so overwhelming, thankful to me. I couldn't hardly go in the streets without I finally didn't wear my Korean War cap.
Oh.
I wore another cap. I went there, and they still stopped and thanked me. And I went back to the little souvenir store there at the Army base, because that was run by a Korean about my same age. And I was 70-something at that time, so we were the oldest ones there. Mm-hmm. And I told them about my experiences out. They wouldn't take my money on the bus. The older ladies wouldn't take my seat whenever there was one room. And I said, and they never charged me. And he says, oh, they know, man, your age, Korean way.
Really, really.
So they just is overwhelming. And they want to thank us. And when I go to Portland, I'm shaking hands all the time. They're just marvelous people, and they're so thoughtful. And so anyway, this book, they've given it similar to the ones where I got all of the ones from the Department of Defense, no postage. Well, I got sort of the same thing. I'm getting all of these books, no postage. So I see if I can deliver them to somebody that has a Greyhound bus stop for free.
Well, it says on the subtitle here, honors war veterans for 60 years of growth. And what a commemorative thing to have. And what makes this so special is the Koreans have sent this to you, Korean War veterans, as not only as a memento, but as a way of saying thank you, because they have been freed. We know the difference between North Korea and South Korea. It's remarkable. And yet to live on the border of another country that wants to wipe you out is quite a challenge, you know.
Yes, it is.
And but Neil, you have been so faithful to this cause. And again, if you want to get a copy of this book, you're going to have about 2,000 showing up at your doorstep here shortly. A big stack of boxes.
Yeah, I do have a website they can go to, and I keep people informed.
Okay.
And that is McCain Institutes, that's plural.
Okay.
.com.
Okay.
Then you have to put a / there, because you know my co-part, the senator.
Yeah.
He's also made about 3 McCain Institutes after mine, and so you'll get to there. So that little / takes you to mine.
Okay. So McCainInstitutes.com / will also get you some information about all of this. And you've been very successful in your memorial there along the highway. Give us a quick update on that.
Well, the memorial is up on, isn't that something?
I-5.
Yeah, I-5. Yeah, Wilsonville. Yeah, my memory's good and the Rams bad. We have quite the Portland chapter have worked primarily the ones on that most of the time, and it's magnificent there. We hold all of our real celebrations there, and when I first seen the sign, Korean War Memorial, it was about 4 years before I ever seen it. I searched for it. I would be going up to Portland for some business. I could never find it. I could never find it. And of course it was after hours, etc. Then one time I finally drove up to the police department. They were usually closed when I was there. This time they was open. I went, so where is this Korean War Memorial at? They said in the back of the police department.
Oh boy!
So I got to see it, and it's all. And the Koreans in Portland probably are the largest supporters of it, and they've been just magnificent. Oh. So each time I go up there, I spend most of my time just shaking their hand.
Wow. Well, on this Thanksgiving week, here we are heading into the holidays. What an incredible Thanksgiving gift from South Koreans to the Korean War Veterans of America. Honor war veterans for 60 years of growth. It's an incredible book. So Korea Reborn, the Korean flag, South Korean flag, and the United States flag. Just looking through this, you go from the wartime up to current time, and the pictures are phenomenal. Just phenomenal.
It's a professional book. It's,
and it's quite heavy. It's big, and it's a hardback. Well, Neil, thanks for what you do and the passion in which you do it. And people who want to get a copy of this, jot this phone number down, 541-479-9489. That's Neil's personal number. And if you are a Korean War vet or you know the family of one, get a hold of him. Get your name on the list right away. These books are going to be showing up quickly, and he'll make arrangements to see that you or your family or the family of a Korean War vet gets one, okay? Neil, thanks, my friend. God bless you.
Thank you very much.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Well, thank you.
Okay. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim, and I work at the Dove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us.